Welcome to the autosportradio.com 2021 show. I'm Don Kay, the host, and we are again at the Grand King Race Shops. And if you're interested in seeing what the Top Gun race team is doing, the shop is right here, so come on down. They're 8155 Crawfordsville Road. Stop on by, take a look, see what's going on. Today's show is presented by Honda and Honda HPD, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the SVRA, NTT IndyCar Series, VP Insurance and Speedway, McGilvery's in Speedway as well, and Dr. Jack Miller and Dr. Liz Lewis. Dr. Jack, of course, is a 500 veteran. They have the best dental practice in town, the Indy Dental Group. We highly recommend it. My guest today is a gentleman that you've seen before. He's been around the motorsports world for quite a long time, and he is now, among other things, can say he's an author. He has completed a book. It's called The Legend of the First Super Speedway. I've read it. It is spectacular. My guest, of course, is the author, Mr. Mark Dill. And Mark, you know, it's amazing. When I first met you, you were the vice president at IMS, and you spent a lot of years in motorsports. How did you get into? I mean, you look about it much like a motorsports guy as I do. I mean, I love the sport. But as a mechanic, I'd be a good broom pusher, which is what I did actually on the race team. But how did you get into motorsports, and what got you involved in it, and why did you get involved in it?
Well, being born here, and I just remember it was the talk of the town. And as I was coming up, you know, that was even before the Indiana Pacers. So basically, Indianapolis came alive in May and then went dark afterwards, and it just amazed me that there was such a buzz. And then my dad mentioned Jim Clark as the world champion, I think in 1963, and I go, yeah, he's my favorite. So I think following his career, you know, made it even more interesting. You got something to cheer for.
But you got involved in sport. You were involved with sponsors of teams and so forth. So you didn't just sit in the grandstand in May. You got involved in the sport.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And I was news director at what was then Indianapolis Raceway Park in college, and I just have a natural ability to write. It's probably my only gift, and so I gravitated towards that way. But I ran in Cow Club in SCCA for 3 years in the late 70s, early 80s, and you know, bumped into some interesting people like Rick Mears, Paul Newman, Steve Saline. You know, it was, you know, SoCal's a big racing community, but I didn't have any money, and I was going broke, and I didn't want to sleep in my car, so I decided to get more serious about a traditional career and went in that direction. And to finish my thought, as I advanced in corporate life, and I was vice president of marketing for Nortel, and by that time I had the influence to be able to go do what I wanted to do, go sponsor an IndyCar. So we hooked up with Scott Goodyear, and Ari Lyondike ran for us in one race, and it was a great one, the 1997 500. So I got to go to Victory Lane and got handed a bottle of milk, and it was just a great experience.
There's something about this sport that it's so different from any other. This is a professional sport. These drivers are athletes. So are the crews. I mean, it takes, like football, the quarterback gets all the press, but and so does the driver. But there's 10 or 12 or 15 other guys that make the driver look good. Mm-hmm. But you know, these are interesting people. They're intelligent people. They keep developing things. When I first came in the engine, it took 3 men and a boy and a jack to get it out of the car. Now you can almost pick it up one-handed. Mm-hmm. And they got more power. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how things have developed in motorsports and the people that make it happen. And that's why I'm still around, because I enjoy the people involved in it.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I've said something similar myself. I mean, you can get some terrific insights from some guy that changes tires. I mean, he or she is in the sport, and they have a lot of experiences that paint the picture. So you're right. There's any number of people that'd be interesting to talk to about their point of view on racing.
Well, when you see a guy change a tire, you could bet on Sunday that's what he does, but Monday through Saturday, they're working in the shop and,
Yeah.
they participate in the car, working on the car.
No, you're right.
And, you know, you are involved with SVRA and Tony Perella and his organization, which has grown immensely since when I first discovered it and you got involved. All of a sudden now he owns Trans Am, which is going gangbusters. He's got the Formula 3 series now, SCCA thing. It's run by Scott Goodyear, former driver.
Our driver.
And it's just booming and you're involved in that, so that keeps you out of, although I have to say, you do take breaks there because I see pictures of you and your grandson constantly, so you must say, time out, Tony, I got something else to do, and off you go.
Yeah, no, Tony is very respectful of that, and he has grandchildren too, and he wishes he lived as close to them as I lived to my boy, and so yeah, we have a lot of fun, but yeah, you know, and I was working for the Speedway, and that's when you and I met, and it was during that time that I had this idea of trying to create a Goodwood at the track in May, and one of the elements would be some form of historic racing, and so I was trying to pull that together, but I wasn't around there long enough to get that done, but I did get to Tony, and it was literally as he was acquiring SVRA. I mean, he wasn't even the owner, but everything was lined up, all the contracts and everything. He knew he was going to do it. So we had some good conversations. I talked to a number of people in that field, historic vintage, and I don't want to disparage anyone else, but I felt like Tony, no, this is a guy I can trust. I just felt that immediately. This guy is honest as the day is long, and he's creative. And he came out of telecommunications like I did, and I knew some of the companies that he had acquired. These were like $500 million companies that were supplying, well, Nortel and other manufacturers. So I knew this guy was the real deal, and he could be consequential in auto racing.
Well, it was interesting, a number of the companies he acquired were on their way down.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
And he turned them around. In fact, I think he was rated 2 or 3 times as one of the top 50 companies in America to work for, or top 10 or something.
Yeah, you're right.
Highly rated.
Yeah, at least a couple of times.
Yeah, so he was a good guy to connect with. Now, the obvious question is, how long did you ponder before that you got the idea you wanted to write a book and put the idea together, what you wanted to do?
I've thought about that, and Esther knows too well, my wife who's here. Yeah, you know, it was really at the turn of the century, you know, right around 2001, 2002, that I was saying, oh, it'd be good to write a book. And I talked to a publishing consultant, this woman by the name of Elizabeth Lyon in Oregon, an absolute total political liberal, so we'll forgive her for that. But she had a lot of insights, and I wanted to write this as a novel, but I wanted it to be factually accurate. I didn't want to compromise any of the facts. So she talked to me a lot about it. So what I realized is I was really good at writing in the business sense, but I needed to learn a lot in terms of putting together a book like this. And, you know, so it was a learning experience, which is great. So I didn't really start writing in earnest until, I don't know, around 2012, and you know, banged it out finally.
Well, I doubt that you banged it out, but if anybody knows you, and if they haven't looked, they got to go to your website, which is?
FirstSuperSpeedway.com. Thanks.
If you don't connect with him on Facebook, it's a mistake. Mark is into the early years, the beginning years, probably the first 10 or 12 or 15 years of the Speedway. And he's got pictures and stories of stuff you go, good Lord, where'd that come from? So you knew what you wanted to do, and I'm sure you have spent hours and hours researching, looking up the characters that are in the book, reading stories about them, so you knew enough about them without talking to them, because you can't talk to them anymore, of course, and you put the book together. Now the thing, I was telling you, a friend of mine read it, and he said to me, how old is Mark? I said, I don't know, probably about, he's getting close to 100. He said, yeah, because he quotes in the story, in the conversations and meetings and so forth. And I said, well, I'll have to ask him about that. But how long did it take you to write this? It had to take it more than, a year.
Oh, yeah, no, it was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years before I wrapped it up. And part of that was the research. Yeah, like I say, I didn't want to compromise the facts. So you go through here, the events I talk about, I date everything, tell you the location. That really happened. And the results happen. And what I try to do is paint the background and think through, well, when someone was confronted with something, what was it that they would be likely to say, given what I know about their personality? And for example, most people don't know this, but in the first races at the Speedway, which were like almost literally a disaster, there was a suspension bridge over the track about where Tunnel 7 is now. And, a bunch of these yahoos got on the bridge and they didn't want to move. They thought that was a great way to look at the race. And it was just wood and rope and some of the soldiers down there that were kind of providing security they telephoned back to the judges stand where Fisher was. It's like, this bridge is going to collapse. And there's race cars running underneath it. And so Fisher got in his, he was mad as hell, and he gets in his car and he goes down, and I talk about him brandishing a gun and chased them all off the bridge. And but I mean, that's the kind of stuff that these situations that I like to bring to life, because they happened. And if you read the newspaper articles of the day, they talk about it. They report it. I was like, how many people know this happened? And I don't know. At least for race fans, I'd like them to know.
Well, after I read the book, I said to myself, Mark had to spend hours, days, weeks researching, digging up old newspaper articles, reading, because when you read the book, you feel like you're involved in a conversation, and that you're sitting there with them, and some of the things that happened actually did happen. Strangely enough, I looked up a couple of the things. I said, I want to know if that happened. I looked, sure enough. Yeah. You almost quoted out of the newspaper exactly what was reported and what they said.
Yeah.
It's an interesting book. Why is your interest in the beginning of it? So you followed the first, 10 or 12 years or so, somewhere in that area?
Yeah, I like to say the first quarter century.
Okay.
But I thought what was really interesting, and I've always had, it's like you talk about Tony Perella at SVRA, I just have tremendous respect for people that are entrepreneurs. And I love motorsports, and it's like, well, it's been underreported how it all came together in the first decade of the 20th century. It just has. It's almost been ignored. And it's interesting. The first general manager of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway wrote in 1909 that the Speedway actually started in 1905. And that's what his article is about. And it's true. Conceptually, it started then. And kind of documenting what happened and make these guys come to life. And thank you for what you said. I wanted people, I mean, it's not candy coated. There's no superhero in here. No. Some amazing people, but the things they did were outrageous, both on the track and out. And I just wanted people to get a better feel for what it was like. And when I was a kid, just 11 years old, I wanted to write a book about the first Indy 500. And I went to Marion County Public Library, and I was going through all this microfilm and stuff, and I just got overwhelmed. I just wasn't an 11-year-old kid. I just wasn't up for it. But that always stuck with me. And so the thing I think it's really interesting about these people is so much of what's happening today is like exactly what they did back then, and I don't think people understand that. Man, Fisher came up with the 33 car starting field because it was based out on how many cars could be in the track at certain distances from each other for a rolling start. He had the first pace car, all these things that we take for granted. It was
You don't think about it. Whose idea was that?
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting, and if I'm not mistaken, the original idea of the track was not necessarily for racing, it was for testing, because there was a lot of cars made in around here, and a place to test the cars, and then somebody had the bright idea, well, why don't we race them? And it started out, like you said, a disaster. People lost their lives. It was a rough track, it was dirty, dusty, I mean, they had all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
But they worked through it and built it up, and look what there is today, the single biggest sporting event in the world.
Yeah.
On any given, even like this year with only 135 or 140,000, it's still the biggest sporting event in the world.
Yeah.
And next year they're telling me, I just talked to Doug, and the tickets are selling well. So look at it. You know, where can somebody get this book? I have a copy sitting here, but you can't have it. But there's a book. Where can you get it?
Well, pretty easily, but you can get an autographed copy, which is obviously the best, from markgdill.com. But it's also available. It's all sales are online with the exception of one California bookstore. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Target, and then over in England, which was a nice surprise, I got noticed that Blackwell's picked it up, and that's a pretty well-noted or pretty famous bookstore in England. And I was like, well, that's cool. So it's readily available.
Well, I highly recommend it. By the way, there is a website where you can get beauties like this. Now, I don't look so beautiful in it, but they have shirts. You see Mark's got a polo shirt, got a hat that you can get. And where do you order this?
Well, I mean, you can get to it through markgdill.com, and it's a great organization that we worked with. We provide the logo and gave them a little startup money, and they print on demand and they sell online, and they take a cut from every sale, which is more than deserved, and that's how it works.
Mark, did you want to plug that California bookstore?
I would, but I forget the name.
That's
Sorry.
All right. That's all right. There's enough places to get it anyway, but I highly recommend it. I'm telling you. I started it, I couldn't put it down. And I have to confess, I missed a meal or two because I didn't want to stop reading because I'd forget what I was
It's our diet plan. That's a new sales feature.
I hadn't thought of that. You know, it's interesting to me, although it slowed down with your grandson occupying some of your time that I know you grunt about, but you sacrifice your time.
Yeah.
But if you go to Facebook and look up Mark Dill and connect with him, I'm telling you, some of the stuff you see, you've heard about maybe, more likely not.
Yeah.
But some of the drivers and the cars and the stories of the people that, you know, in the early years of the Speedway, very interesting to read. And I want you to know I read it because I like it. So
I know you read it because you comment. And I'd also like to add to that actually for a lot of your audience, probably the Facebook location that they find most useful is not my personal page, but we've got a page called First Super Speedway. And so if you search for First Super Speedway, I try to post there daily. I don't always, but and it's always stuff that you can link to my original website, firstsuperspeedway.com, and get more information. But yeah, thank you, and I get a lot of good feedback from that.
I should ask your wife, who's standing here saying, yeah, he's always doing that. How much time do you spend searching to put stuff up? Because, I mean, you come up with pictures that are so obscure that nobody probably, some of the drivers have never heard of, but you tell them about it. Where do you find the time to look for this?
Most
do
of
you cut the grass at all, or do you have?
No,
you have
I have a landscaper. No, I would. I just say right now I'm in a better position than I was a few years ago because my website is packed. I did for a brief period web communications for Blue Cross Blue Shield in North Carolina. I knew how much content was on that corporate website. There's more on firstsuperspeedway.com. So I just kind of pick out a photo or something and that's already on the page and tell the story of it and link to it for more information. So all that work I did years ago pays off in that regard as well. I don't have to. But your whole point about research, and people ask, well, how long did it take you to write the book? It's like, sitting in front of a computer and typing, it was a lot shorter time than all the research that I had to do.
No question.
If I had sort of made it up, well, it would have gone much faster. But like I say, this is factually accurate, and that's what I want people to understand. It's the situations that actually happened, and the race results reported are exactly what happened. And I just try to weave it together from the perspective of two men, Barney Oldfield and Carl Fisher.
And they didn't always see eye to eye on everything,
No.
and how they struggled through and made it happen, and the people they brought in to help them
Oh yeah.
with the lighting and all kinds of odd things that went on that most people don't really recall. When you read, you go, holy smokes, this is how, look what's happened after 107 years
Mhm.
of racing. Look what we got today. It's amazing.
Obviously everyone from that time period has passed away, and there aren't even that many people that are family members that are still around. But I did talk to William Nolan, who is a very noted author. He's passed away, but he wrote the definitive book of Barney Oldfield. And I also talked to Jerry Fisher, you may know, who wrote Pace Setter, the biography of probably the best of the three biographies on Carl Fisher. And, so I felt like I got some guys that had some real insight of what it was like to walk in those shoes, even though everyone's passed. So that's worth noting.
It's very interesting. What started out as an idea and the arguing and fighting and pushing and shoving to get things to where it would work. The tracks initially was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd work all night to try and make it a little better, which by the end of 5 miles it wasn't
Right.
much better anyway. How it evolved into what it is today, it's amazing, going through the dirt area into the brick area and now to the paved
Yes.
area. It's just very interesting how he puts grandstands up and filled them and kept expanding, and the thing just kept growing. It's amazing how
Yeah.
it's done. And guess what? It's all right here.
Yep.
So get a copy, and I guarantee you'll enjoy it. I don't know if you'll miss a meal like I did, but
I've had people write me and say, I'm not a race fan, and I read this and it was great. So that's really gratifying that it's just a good story.
it's a history story.
It is a
Historical
history,
story,
yeah.
historical event that's the biggest thing in the world today. It started off as dirt.
Yeah, and I mean, that whole thing with Fisher, it's unvarnished. It was really crazy what he did,
Yeah.
as far as like rushing the track into existence. And then, I talked about the first auto races, but the first motorcycle races were terrible too.
Yeah.
People were getting injured, and basically it was supposed to be a 2-day thing. And the organization said, no, we're done after the first day. And so, no, it was rough. And Carl was just such an impatient guy. I mean, he would just ramrod things through, but that, it's like people say, you just can't rush the result. You just, you've got to have some patience. And Carl was short on patience.
Well, a lot of people learned, don't rush from him. All
Yeah,
the
right.
mistakes he made,
That
all the
example.
problems he had, and it was amazing. Well, I appreciate your time. I know you're in town because you have an athlete
Yep,
with you who is here to participate. What is it? The Memorial
the Monumental Marathon.
Monumental Marathon. Of course, you're going to be out there.
I'm
running
gonna
as
do
well.
the 5K, so I'm gonna move my legs too.
Wow. I understand your wife is pretty good. She could
she's
beat you.
she's faster than me. I'm really proud of her. She turned 70 this year, and she's always winning her age group. And but she runs up in the top half of all the runners. So she's proving age is not.
I've got news for you. You're in trouble. You never tell a female that. She doesn't look any more that age than.
No, she admits it. She's posted. So
Oh, I didn't know that, and I don't look for that. I don't care.
yeah.
Well, I congratulate you on three fronts. Number one is your wife, number two is your grandson, and number three is this. It's really a good book. If you haven't read it, I highly trust me. I'm not a big reader. I don't spend hours and hours reading books, but this one was good.
Thank you.
Thanks for your
Appreciate
time. Glad you're in time as an athlete. I mean, you're in town as an athlete, and taking the time to come stop by.
it. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for being here.
I love it, Don.
This has been Mark Dill, the author of The Legend of the First Super Speedway. If you haven't read it, get it. We have some more guests lined up upcoming, so stay with us. Until the next time, this is Don Kay saying thanks for watching. Till the next time, we'll see you.